from London. You start, and in a recent article, you reminded us, of course, of your own family background that has that suffered so strongly as a result of Nazi Second World War and the Holocaust. And you fast forward on to today. So the worrying sign of, if you like, the fraying of the bonds between capitalism and democracy. But what can we do about it?
Well, that's a very big question. I think the first thing we have to do about it is be aware that we're no longer in normal times. We have moved in different ways to different degrees. And let me be very clear, I'm not comparing us with the 30s, of course not. But we moved to times in which the basic compact between among the players in the democratic realm, their acceptance of the legitimacy of their opponents and the legitimacy of elections is in question. Many regimes, not yet in core Western states, but many regimes are becoming increasingly undemocratic around the world. And that I argue that in many places, and certainly in the West, part of what is fraying this is the failure to deliver the economic compact on which our societies depend, which is the basic acceptance and the ability to provide rising living standards for the great majority of the population and economic stability. What we can do about that, where we need to run our economies much better, we need to be able to promote growth better, we need to deal with some of the risks that people find so difficult to manage, like sudden surges in imports, for example, which we've handled very, very badly in many countries. And we need also to reconsider how our politics work. We need to find ways of bringing back the wide range of popular opinions into politics.
But we seem to be singularly incapable or unwilling to deal with many of those things. I mean, hard though they are to actually attack, we actually seem to avoid dealing with them and frequently go in the opposite direction.
There's no doubt that a sort of form of populist politics, which blames everything on elites and on some other groups in the population which are not oneself, is much more popular. It's much easier. It's been very successful. It's how we got Brexit. In my view, it's how Donald Trump became such a dominant political figure. So it is easy. But if we want to preserve our system, we need to do some pretty serious work. And the sort of people I write for in the Financial Times are going to be part of that because they have a great deal of influence. I would have to say that despite all these faults and mistakes, that some of what President Biden has been trying to do to actually get things done, to give people hope, to give the chance of believing that government can do things, that's a pretty good start. It's part of what we have to do.
Martin, within the last hour, the president of the World Bank, David Malpass, has announced he is stepping down early. He's due out at 24. It's believed he's going in June of this year. Now, obviously, it's a political appointment, and perhaps President Biden wouldn't have reappointed him anyway. But Malpass's time at the bank has not been a particularly happy one.
I think that's fair. He was very much an outsider in his views and attitudes, pretty consciously so. That's why the Trump administration chose him. He clearly wasn't in line with some of the core assumptions of bank staff about what the priorities, and actually bank members were what the priorities were, like dealing with climate change. Many people feel the bank did not rise to the occasion of COVID and dealing with the problems of COVID for developing countries very well. I have to say his predecessor, Jim King, was not very successful either. So this is not really a partisan point. We want a president of the World Bank who will motivate it to deal with some of the big challenges of developing countries right now.
The first question that's going to be asked, of course, is, does the duopoly survive? You know, IMF goes to Europe, World Bank goes to the United States. Now, I'm a nail in the colours to the mast. I can't see the US giving it up, and they are the largest shareholder. But at some point, the duopoly is going to go.
Well, I think the duopoly is very unfortunate, though I understand that to some degree it cements the loyalty of the big countries to these institutions. But the big problem I've had, and there are some distinguished exceptions, is that this would be a relatively small problem if they consistently put in place very high quality figures that everybody can see are going to do the job well. But I think particularly at the World Bank, even more than at the IMF, though there are problems there too, the Americans just haven't done that well. They've tended to choose pretty second or third rate people in whom very few members of the staff or the board have confidence. And of course, it doesn't work very well. So what matters to me is who will President Biden now effectively appoint to this job. And that is a big and important decision.
Martin, wonderful to have you on the programme tonight. Obviously, talk about your book and also to give us perspective on the World Bank. Thank you, sir.